Okay, my name is Alphonse Israel, and I'm speaking to you all the way from the capital of Namibia, Windhoek. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's talk proceedings. I feel privileged to open this event and start here where many accomplished men and women who I admire and look up to are present at. Okay, I would like to give a very special welcome to our chief guest, Master Nigel Roberts, who truly has set a benchmark in the trade of the operating room. He is going to give us more insight on the enhancement of human factors and civilities in the operating room. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our founder and chief of proceedings of the operating room global, has truly Ms. Adebushola Wokole. Thank you, and thank you very much. Okay, so a very warm welcome once again to everyone. We are thrilled to have you join us today as we delve into this session and get ready for an ongoing and engaging, insightful session filled with valuable information and discussions. So I ask that we embark on this journey together and then we keep the chain going. So in our next proceedings, we have Ms. Yvonne Aguirre to tell us who exactly is Mr. Nigel Roberts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll be reading a short biography about the speaker. Introducing Nigel Roberts, PhD scholar, MSc, BA, ODP, head theater practitioner, head of nursing, Birmingham Women's and Children's UK, NEBOSH, Prince 2. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that we introduce our esteemed guest speaker for today's talk webinar, Nigel Roberts. Nigel is a highly accomplished operating department practitioner, currently serving as the head of nursing at Birmingham Children's Hospital. He brings with him a wealth of experience and experts in the field of healthcare and patient safety. Nigel's dedication to enhancing patient safety in the operating theater is evidenced through his extensive involvement in the healthcare community. In addition to his role as head of nursing, he also serves as the deputy chief for National Network of Theater Managers, further demonstrating his commitment to improving healthcare practices on a national level. Nigel's impressive academic pursuits include his ongoing doctoral of philosophy studies at the University of Derby. His research focuses on a critical issue in healthcare, the prevention of intraoperative surgical nerve events in NHS operating theaters. Nigel's work not only identifies the barriers to safer surgery, but also dives into the essential role of human factors in reducing patient harm. His dedication to addressing key challenges in the field is exemplified by his 11 non-peer-reviewed papers and 1 peer-reviewed paper published to date. The core of Nigel's research revolves around the prevention of surgical nerve events, which encompasses critical issues such as wrong site surgery, wrong implants or prostheses, and retained foreign objects post-procedures. His work is driven by a passion for ensuring the highest level of patient safety during surgical procedures. Nigel Roberts holds an impressive academic background, including a PhD scholar title, an MSc, and a BA. Furthermore, as the head theater practitioner and head of nursing at Birmingham Women and Children's, he is at the forefront of clinical practice, providing a real-world insight into the challenges and opportunities for improving patient safety. We are honored to have Nigel Roberts to join us as speaker at today's webinar, where he will share his invaluable insight into patient safety in the operating theater. His dedication to research, his wealth of experience, and his commitment to improving healthcare practices make him a distinguished expert in this field. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from Nigel and gain a deeper understanding of the critical issues surrounding patient safety in surgical procedures. Please join us in welcoming Nigel Roberts to share his invaluable insight with us. Thank you very much. Welcome, Mr. Roberts.
Good evening, and thank you for having me this evening for the next hour. So without further ado, I'll get in and share my slides with everybody on the screen this morning. Can everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Brilliant. So
Yes, we can.
as we said, so for the next hour, I just want to talk to you about human factors and civility in the NHS operating theatres, but this can also be accustomed to any operating theatre or any treatment room in the world. So the next 50 slides or so are going to give you some examples of how we interact and how we talk to one another can have an impact on patient harm. So this is just, like I say, for the next hour, it's a simple introduction into how human factors have an impact on our patients in the operative care setting. So the more we understand the problems, the greater is our solutions. So just a quick hands up, has anybody had any human factors training or civility training before on the call, or is this quite a new topic to people? Okay, so the session overview, we'll talk about new and current research findings, what human factors in healthcare is about, non-technical skills, patient safety insulated reporting framework, how does the NHS compare to other industries, the Swiss cheese model, HALT, few case studies, civility in the operating theatres and in healthcare. So as part of my PhD research findings, I was looking at why intraoperative never events occur in the operating theatres. And from that, the overarching theme was due to education. And the sub-themes from education was staff welfare, processes that we use in the theatre, having the time to deliver the World Health Organization checklist, civility, and resources. And from there, it all links into human factors, and the golden threads that came out of the research was poor staff attitudes, a poor culture, and the leadership needed to be improved. So here are some quotes from across the National Health Service in the UK, why never events still occur. Human and environmental factors. We're all humans, we all make mistakes. There will always be mistakes. Human factors is a huge element. The ergonomics of things and interruptions. And the one that we can probably all share is staff are tired, exhausted, a lot of pressure, and being rushed. So how does this relate into what human factors are? So human factors are about the organizational, individual, environmental, and job characteristics that influence behavior in ways that can impact safety. So what do we mean by human factors? So the patient is at the center of everything we do. And everybody on this call that works either in an operating theatre, an operating room, or a treatment room, or is involved in any part of the patient journey will have distractions. They'll have decisions to make. Have to be aware of what is happening. Stress from around the team. Leadership. Are you the leader in that team? Are your instructions clear? Teamwork. Is the multidisciplinary team working cohesively and working as a team? Is the communication clear, whether that be verbal or non-verbal? Have you got a good safety culture in your healthcare world and the work environment itself, especially when we're using power tools, or if we're using suction or the radio's on, etc. So non-technical skills. These fall under communication, leadership, teamwork, decision-making skills, situational awareness, and attitudes. And as we go through the slides, we'll touch upon each one as we're going through. So theatres are very busy places with a high potential for unintended patient injury. A multidisciplinary team approach is required for safe patient care. So an integrated model of how human factors is. So safe patients and safe staff. It's to have a just and open culture where we can learn and develop and ensure that we always improve our processes. The equipment, the environment, and the process are designed to support the workforce, and resilient workforce is aware of self and team performance limitations. So in the UK, in the National Health Service, we've now adopted a patient safety incident reporting framework. And the idea of this is to share the goals of the outcomes of any patient harm that happened. It's a new innovative technique, and it will understand why never events keep happening. PSIRF will also attempt to comprehend how and why the occurrence occurred, in addition to adding to the pertinent details. So, as I said earlier on, the National Health Service is always compared to three industries: aviation and rail. So if I can just going to use some numbers now in terms of how many incidents have happened in each of these industries compared to the National Health Service and the three interoperative never events, which in the UK are wrong implant or prosthesis, wrong site surgery, or retained foreign object. So if we take rail first, there's 321 incidences since 2012 to 2023. We look at nuclear plants, there's been 8 incidents since 1957. But when we look at aviation, there hasn't been one single accident in the UK's air. And they're the numbers there, just to reiterate. So in terms of the NHS, how does that compare? The number of never events on this slide stood at over 3,155. However, this slide has now been updated to include data up to December 2023. Wrong site surgery is still the largest never event, but this has increased to 1,695 cases. Retained foreign objects is the second largest. This has now increased to 1,114 cases, and wrong implant or prosthesis stays static at around about 530 wrong implant or prosthesis. So as can be seen, the NHS has a lot more risk and harm compared to rail, aviation, and nuclear. The NHS is still learning from these industries, and together we can and will make a different model. So this is where it's a perfect line where incidents occur due to all missed opportunities aligning, and which then leads to patient harm. So considerations to try and stop never events and patient harm occurring is that healthcare will never eliminate risk. Healthcare is complex, and that is anywhere in the world. We are all humans.
I can hear you speak.
Sorry. Humans will always make mistakes. Patient safety is paramount and must never be compromised. We must all adapt and acknowledge to learn to live with risk. We must follow procedures and protocols. They must be designed to support and help and not hinder. We need to create a working environment that reduces risk to a minimum, and we must endeavour to have continual education and training. So the next few slides are what we're all here for. We all work in an operating theatre, an operating room, or a treatment room where patients are our main priorities. So the first slide is just some examples of how products are labelled. The question here is, who would get the blame? We're now working in an industry where blame shouldn't be given. Staff shouldn't be made to feel scapegoats. It's an error. As you can see on the left-hand side, the heparin vials, there's a protamine one mixed in with them. Voltarol, same design box, all different dosages. And on the right-hand side, 3 different drugs, all labelled the same: water, lignocaine, and normal saline. So optimization factors, when you're working in your operating theatre, why do we bend rules? And that's because the system does not accommodate the reality of the goal. So the next few slides are just going to be looking at never events in the operating theatre and incidents of what's happened. So my first question here, I want you to consider, if you when you're in your own country driving, do you always stick to the speed limit? And that will become clearer as we go further along in the slides. So 93% of us think we're above average drivers. So how does that relate to understanding and optimizing factors? So this is Alan Bertie's 2006 model. So the legal speed limit on the motorways in the United Kingdom is 70 miles per hour. Normal illegal, this is where we're pushing the boundaries and we're going a little bit faster. And before we know it, we're going above 85 miles an hour. And it's illegal behavior, and this allows for incidents to happen. So as we go through the next 3 or 4 slides, just remember that model. So as an example, you're the senior manager on call for your healthcare organisation. There are no beds in the hospital, but patients are still arriving and turning up for treatment. So what do? Do you consider putting the patients in storerooms? Do you consider putting the patients in cupboards? And actually, this is what has happened in the UK in the National Health Service. These are true images of patients and family that circulated on social media, where the hospitals had run out of spaces and beds to put patients. So how does this impact on the Alan Bertie's model? So the legal normal speed limit is normal bed management. This is where we carry on day to day. We're now bending the rules where we're normalizing illegal behavior. We've got no ward space, but we will use corridors for patients to rest on. Then once we've used up the corridor space, we go to the cupboards and the basement. So what do we do when we have no corridors or cupboard space? And in the United Kingdom, this is a sad story where it's happening day after day, where ambulances are now queuing to drop patients off because the health service is working at 110% capacity. The next slide is a true story of a gentleman who was an 87-year-old man with prostate cancer who tripped and fell in his garden, breaking ribs and breaking his pelvis. On the advice from the NHS call handlers, he was told not to move him. The family was so concerned about his welfare that they waited for an ambulance and they built him a tent to protect him from the rain. He was 15 hours waiting for a 999 ambulance to come and pick him up. So the second example is where this relates to ourselves in the operating theatre. Legal behaviour is we all comply to the World Health Organization's WHO checklist. As you probably know, going into the brief in the morning, some of the medical staff might say, we've got a big list, we've got no time, we all know what we're doing. However, we are now normalising illegal behaviour. And then before we know it, we're taking shortcuts, we don't follow the procedure, and this is where intraoperative never events or patient harm may occur. Some of you may remember from the last time I presented a few months ago, I spoke about NATSIPs, which are the National Safety Standards for Invasive Procedures. This is what we use here across the 4 countries in the United Kingdom. These are extra guidelines to make sure that the theatre staff, which is the entire multidisciplinary team, are doing everything we can to ensure the patient does not come to any harm. Several years ago, in 2005, there was a big investigation into a hospital called Mid Staffordshire. And when we talk through these next few slides, we need to think about situational awareness in the theatres and leadership. Between 2005 and 2009, between 400 and 1,200 patients died as a result of poor care. Poor decision-making at the trust board level and cost-cutting to gain foundation status was cited as reasons for patient deaths. The trust initially told investigators the high rate of deaths was down to coding errors. However, feedback from the staff, they spoke up who were ignored to suggest that they showed others a shocking lack of compassion. The standards of hygiene were at times awful, with families forced to remove bandages and dressings from public areas and clean toilets themselves. Receptionists with no medical training were expected to assess incoming A&E patients. A complete failure of management, a true shocking story of appalling standards and a chaotic system for looking after patients. Decision-making and psychological safety. So this talks about interpersonal risk-taking and self-censorship. Individuals frequently do not speak up because they fear that they'll be harshly judged. Will I be made to feel a scapegoat? It's your team, so therefore you are responsible. Despite the non-blame culture that the NHS aspires to, there's always a nervousness that we as managers will be held responsible for any incidents in our departments. Can you challenge your colleagues openly in your daily working environment without the fear of prejudice or retaliation? Are you as individuals supported by your manager to challenge the current situation and working practices around patient safety? And have you got a just and open culture? So situational awareness, this is where time and performance pressures, a high workload, adverse physical conditions, conflict in information, the list orders changing, for example, medical staff are telling you one story, theatre staff are telling you another story, auditory overload or interference. This is obviously suction, music, conversations, and power tools. These all impact as part of our situational awareness in any operating theatre across the globe. So HALT is a model that was introduced into the National Health Service in the UK in 2017. Risk factors for staff making mistakes and poor decisions. It's thinking about the correct use of language, escalation, reduce loss of situational awareness, empowering staff to raise concerns, and susceptible to self-destructive behaviours. So HALT, are you hungry or thirsty? When did you last eat? Are you angry? Are you anxious? What are you facing right now that's making you stressed? Is it making you angry? Late or lonely? Being late adds stress. Does this task in hand need to be checked by somebody else? And T is tired. Are you resting enough between shifts and taking breaks? So what I want to do now is play you a video from 2005, which highlights how human factors, and by us as theatre staff who has a voice to speak up, can actually make a difference to patient care. So I'm just going to try and share with you a video if I can. Can you see the video on the screen, everybody?
Yes.
My name's Martin Bromley.
Okay.
I'm dad to 2 young children, Victoria and Adam. And this is the story of the death of my wife, Elaine, who died in March 2005 as a result of an attempted routine operation that went wrong. I'm an airline pilot with a background in human factors. I want to make a difference. I want to be able to say to Victoria and Adam in a few years' time that although their mum died, the lessons from that have been learned, and that there is a change in practice in healthcare in the UK. Elaine actually had very good health, but she had suffered from some sinus problems, and as a result, a consultant had recommended that she should have routine sinus surgery. We left at 8:30 in the morning, having kissed mummy goodbye, and went off to do the weekly food shop. I got a phone call at about 11 o'clock that morning from the ENT consultant, and they explained to me that when Elaine had been anaesthetised, her airway had collapsed, that the oxygen levels in her body had fallen to very low levels. And so they decided that the safer option was to let Elaine wake up naturally. And unfortunately, she hadn't done so. I went across to the intensive care unit, and there I was met by 2 further consultants. They explained to me very bluntly that Elaine had been without oxygen for a significant period of time, and that I was looking at her having significant brain damage. Another brain scan was taken, and even to me as a layman, comparing the new scan with the benchmark scan, there was no doubt that by this stage there was virtually nothing that could be done for Elaine. And I made the decision in consultation with the intensive care team to switch Elaine's life support off. She died some 13 days after the original attempted operation. And really what I want to try and do is just share a bit of the story with you of what we know happened as best we can. We've probably got 80% of the picture now, I think. Elaine was being cared for by an experienced anaesthetist and his experienced assistant. The plan was that they would start with a laryngeal mask, and they had done a very thorough pre-op assessment. There were no undue causes for concern at this stage. And at 8:35 in the morning, Elaine was anaesthetised.
Off we go. Off to sleep.
The first mask wouldn't fit. They tried a second mask.
I'm having problems here. Hold down a bit. Let me push the head back a bit more.
They then tried some extra drugs to try and reduce some suspected tension in the muscles in the jaw. So it was obvious almost straight away that things were going wrong. We know that 2 minutes in, Elaine's oxygenation was 75% and falling, and she was by this time already visibly blue. Within 4 minutes, we know that her oxygenation had fallen to 40% or lower. There's some confusion about the precise time, but we know that 6 to 8 minutes in, a number of things were happening. The anaesthetist had already started to attempt to intubate Elaine. The oxygenation was still at 40% or lower. The heart rate was falling. The ENT surgeon waiting to perform the op came into the theatre. An anaesthetist from an adjoining theatre became aware of a commotion, and he walked in to see what could be done. And at least 3 nurses answered a call for help. And what happened is that the 3 consultants continued with the attempts to intubate, and they used a variety of different techniques and a variety of different pieces of equipment. The nurses, meanwhile, performed some tasks under their own initiative. But what we can say is that 10 minutes in, with hindsight, this is a situation of can't intubate, can't ventilate. This is a recognised emergency in anaesthesia for which guidelines exist. We're now 10 minutes into this attempted procedure. The patient, my wife, is blue. Her oxygenation is 40% or lower, and it has been for 6 minutes. The anaesthetist has 16 years experience, and he is regarded as diligent by his colleagues. The ENT surgeon has over 30 years experience. The other anaesthetist has additional skills pertaining to difficult airways, and 3 of the 4 nurses are all experienced in their job. And it's perhaps worth just wondering at this stage what was going through their mind. The intubation attempts had failed. The oxygenation was very low. What we know actually happened is this point in 10 minutes for a further 15 minutes, the 3 consultants would appear to have continued with their attempts to intubate to the exclusion of any other option. And that at the end of that 15 minutes, we're now 25 minutes into the whole procedure, they eventually get Elaine's oxygenation to 90%, but she's actually been at 40% or lower for a total now for over 20 minutes.
Okay. Can we get above 90?
No, she won't go up.
No, you got 90 though. That's better. I don't think we should carry on with the operation.
No, I agree. I think we should abandon it at this stage.
Okay.
The airway itself is not secure though, and so they fiddle around a bit more, and in fact her oxygenation falls again below 90% for a further 10 minutes. And finally, by the time we're 35 minutes in, they seem to make the decision that the best thing is just to let her wake up naturally.
Let's wheel her back, quick as we can.
And they transfer her to the recovery room. Based on the evidence from the inquest and from Professor Harmer's report, the lead anaesthetist, if I can call him that, in his own words, lost control. There was a question mark in the inquest about who people felt was in charge at different points. There was certainly a loss of awareness, an awareness of time, but also an awareness of the seriousness of the situation. If you like, the awareness of what was happening wasn't shared by each of the consultants. There was certainly a breakdown in the decision-making processes, and it would appear that the communication processes dried up amongst the consultants. The story with the nurses is very different. The nurses were generally aware of what was happening and what needed to happen. When I said to you that 6 to 8 minutes in, those 3 nurses arrived, one of them asked her colleague to go and fetch the tracheostomy set. There was already a quick trachea kit in theatre. She went out, she collected the tracheostomy set, she came back in and she announced to the consultants that the tracheostomy set was available, and there was no response. One of the other nurses who walked in immediately saw Elaine's colour, immediately saw the vital signs, and walked out again to phone intensive care. She phoned to check that a bed was immediately available. She came back in and she announced to the 3 consultants that a bed was available in intensive care. And in her own words, they looked at her as if to say, "What's wrong? You're overreacting." She actually walked out and cancelled that bed. At the inquest, 2 of the 4 nurses stated that they knew exactly what needed to happen, but again, to quote from the inquest, didn't know how to broach the subject. We have a breakdown of leadership, of situational awareness, of prioritization, of decision making, of communication, and of assertiveness. And these same factors, these same human factors, ironically, are present in 75% of aviation accidents. And really, since then, I've been trying to understand why in aviation we train and to understand about human factors, and it's an integral part of how we design equipment and how we manage procedures and how we work day to day. It's part of our everyday language, but I'm trying to understand why that's not part of clinical practice. When we get out to the aircraft, there's a lot of technical jobs that need to be performed. There's the usual security checks of an empty aircraft. There's the safety checks, both of the outside. We have to do a walk around, making sure the systems are functioning and that everything we require for flight is switched on or operating in the way it should. Having done all the preparation, got everything ready for flight, we then get together in a briefing. And that's really to make sure that we both know what we expect to happen, but more importantly, that we think through all the possibilities. Up to 100 knots, you'll consider stopping for any ECAM warning or caution. Above 100, you'll only consider stopping ECAM warning, engine failure, something you think is going to stop us flying. 3 things to remind me of. With a positive climb, we'll get the gear up if appropriate. Remind me that TOG is available. Remind me autopilot's available. If it's not performance limiting, up post, follow the SID. The only other exception to that is if we had some uncontrollable situation like a fire still burning when we get to S speed, in which case I'll pull that and it's suitable for a right-hand visual back to 27 right today. Any questions on the emergencies? Okay, as far as departure, it's an opening up of communication. Human factors tells us that actually we're all wrong no matter how good we are, and we need people around us to help us. It's creating that open environment within your colleagues, being open to suggestions. If they put their hand up and say, excuse me, not sure about this, it's not turning around and saying, actually, I'm the boss here. It's turning around and saying, tell me what your concern is. It's listening. And before you ask, by the way, what happened to the people who were involved in my wife's incident, you will be pleased to know that they all returned to work eventually after the incident. And that is exactly what I wanted to happen. By being back in the workplace, they can spread those very personal lessons on to their colleagues. And all of them will be much better clinicians as a result of what happened, that there's no doubt. The key message I would emphasize is that in aviation, we know 75% of accidents are caused by human factors. In healthcare, what's the statistic? Is it 75% as well? Is it 85%? Is it 55%? No one really knows. My argument is, though, that the actual statistic is irrelevant. If you accept common sense and look around you, that tells you a large proportion of accidents and incidents will be caused by human factors. The lessons from other industries are there, and they're equally applicable to healthcare. And if it is only 45%, that is an awful lot of lives that we could be saving. Let's wake up to human factors. Let's make a difference.
So I hope you've enjoyed that video. So let's just go back to the slides and the presentation. Can you see the slides on the screen?
Yes.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you for that. So in terms of what happened, so if we take it through each step, unexpected loss of an airway. This resulted in cognitive overload, and it was just a routine procedure. Multiple consultants. So this brought in a very steep hierarchy and gradient. loss of process, must intubate the patient, fixation on the error resulting in transgression of emergency protocol, did not recognize the acute nature of the situation and time was passing. This is perception and situational awareness, and staff could not speak up, hierarchical and psychological safety. Staff accepted the wrong decision. As Martin Bromley quoted, he thought this is the classic human factors stuff, fixation, error, time perception, hierarchy. This is not the place for individual blame. And if anything from tonight's presentation, I want you to be able to go back to your working environment in whichever healthcare setting you're in. And if you feel at that moment in time there is something not right in regard to that patient's care, you must speak up. And you should be supported by your line manager and by your colleagues. You are there as an advocate for the patient, and it is your responsibility to actually question what is occurring. So if we go on to performance factors, and we'll talk about the organizational ones first, where human factors can have an impact. As we said before, we work in a complex system. Healthcare is very, very complex. Inadequate training and education. This is what came out of 4 years of my PhD research in terms of the surgical safety checklist, human factors, and civility. And it's talks like tonight that are sharing the knowledge and ensuring and opening up everybody's eyes to how human factors and civility impact on our day-to-day work in the operating theatre. Confusing data, unavailable or inaccurate procedures, poor access to equipment. So there might be one piece of equipment that's needed by 2 or 3 anaesthetic rooms or operating theatres, as an example. Lighting, noise. Then we talk about the mental factors on performance: memory, perception, concentration, communication, stress, attitude, behaviours, health and well-being. So post-COVID, this is a question that's been brought in as part of the WHO checklist team brief in the morning. And it's just a case of asking the staff you're working with in that operating room, theatre, treatment room, is everybody okay? Has anybody got any stresses, any concerns? Hearing, skill set, vision, fatigue. We're all working extra long hours. We're all tired. Brings you back to the health and well-being. Check on each other. Then when we talk about the physical factors, poor ergonomics, poor design of equipment, poor teamwork, pressure from your colleagues, distractions, excessive workload, climatic changes, the temperature. Are you working in cardiac? Is it hot? Is it too cold? Sorry. Are you working in burns theatre where the temperature is above 30 degrees? So as we go throughout our working day, at any minute in time, we are only working at 80%. This is our part of our limbic region of the brain. This controls reward, motivation, and addiction, as well as emotional responses, fight or flight response, memory, automatic processes, attention, and learning. And we've probably all of us on this call have sometimes wondered when we've left work, how we've actually got back home. And that is because 20% of the time we allow for accidents and errors. So the next few slides is a new topic really across the National Health Service in the UK. And I think it's an emerging theme across the world. And this is civility. We cannot change the human condition, but we can change the conditions humans work within. So what do I mean about incivility? So this is how we talk to one another, how we interact with one another, how the decisions that we make as an individual, whether you're the leader in that theatre or a member of the team, impact on our working colleagues. So I'll go back to aviation again. This is just showing some disasters that have happened recently. So the Korean flight 801, 229 casualties. Polish air flight 101, 96 casualties. And the latest one was the Air Blue flight in Pakistan, where 152 casualties died. And it was found the ultimate reason, or the overarching reason for this, was down to incivility. This is where the captain thought he or she knew best, and the co-pilot was frightened to question or to give any idea or thoughts into the disaster that is happening. And this is the same for the NHS and global healthcare providers, that if we don't speak up, or if we've got a concern and we don't raise it correctly, or if we raise it and we get mocked, or our team colleagues don't support us, this will lead to patient harm. So the next slide are some examples of how incivility occurs in the operating rooms or operating theatres. And we'll probably guess the majority of you have come across this throughout your working day. Eyes rolling, insulting and yelling at others, being undermined in front of your colleagues, belittling or condescending jokes, being treated like a child, whether that be from the senior person in theatre or by your colleagues, overruling decisions without giving a reason, disrupting meetings, being berated, ignoring or excluding people, talking behind people's back, voice intonation, not giving credit where it's due, a simple thank you, good manners doesn't cost anything, dismissive gestures, and sighs and mutterings. So there's been some good research done by Christine Porrath with her colleague Christine Pearson, looking at the price of incivility. As can be seen there, 14,000 staff was included in the case study across 17 different industries. The results was quite stark. 48% of people who had incivility at work decreased their work ethic. 47% of staff intentionally decreased the time they spent at work. If people aren't attending work due to incivility, it puts more pressure on the staff that remain at work. 38% intentionally decreased the quality of their work. 80% lost work time worrying about the incidents. I think the next one down is quite worrying. 12% said they'd left their job. We all know how hard it is to retain staff. They are our most valuable asset, and we must do everything we can to ensure that staff don't leave. Then the final one, 25% of staff admitting taking out their frustrations out on customers. So the impact on being civil is quite stark, where it shows more people are more likely to share information, advice, seek information from other people, and work harder. The next slide is from a research paper a few months ago. Called Incivility in the Operating Theatres, Early Research Findings. So theatres are a stressful nature of the medical job is known trigger for aggression or abuse among medical healthcare staff. Interprofessional incivility, defined as low intensity negative interactions, is an occupational concern. I think the next couple of points was quite interesting. The study found that incivility is common among doctors and nurses, which has both psychological and clinical outcomes, stress, compromised patient safety, and poor quality of care. It affects medical, physical, and cognitive skills, teamwork, and professional communication, which are all linked back to human factors. Incivility undermines team performance in the perioperative setting. And the research found that surgeons who have a high record of incivility can be at higher risk of complications. So over the past 15 years, incivility is becoming a more of a concern. And as we said before, I think further research is definitely required into this field. The next slide just shows you some papers that have been published in terms of incivility. So exposure to incivility hinders clinical performance, the prevalence and impact on unprofessional behaviours amongst workers, incivility in healthcare, the impact of poor communication, rudeness on the medical team performance, and randomised trials. So the next slide is just to give you something to think about in regards to the recent airline disaster, the Japanese one, where their aircraft landed and burst into flames, but the cabin crew was fully staffed, they was trained, they have ongoing education, good leadership, and all the crew worked in harmony, and that is why there was not one death on board that flight. But how does that compare to the operating theatres, operating rooms, or treatment centres? So the first question to ask yourself is, are your operating theatres fully staffed as per guidelines or local arrangements? If not, has there been a risk assessment on the guidelines? When did the staff last receive training for a particular product, item, or administrative task? Delivery of the checklist. Are all 5 or 6 steps undertaken? Do you have annual and mandated training on the delivery of the checklist, along with civility and human factors? Does your organisation run scenario-based training, i.e. simulated trainers and multidisciplinary team? Is there good, strong, visible leadership in the treatment rooms or operating theatres as to ensure all 5 or 6 steps are completed? And the last slide I want to leave you with is, whether you work in a hospital, theatre, or any other setting where patients are cared for, it is everybody's responsibility to make sure that staff members have the time to regularly access education events following their induction. This allows individuals to receive updates and training on both local and national current processes, which helps to reduce mistakes, improve patient safety, and assist them in recognising how human factors affect the decisions that we all make daily. So I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nigel. And I must say, this is very insightful and eye-opening. For me, something that that struck with me the most is alt and the wall of incivility, which I think I'm going to share because the ones I've heard I can improve. This is a session where we ask questions, make clarifications. If we have anyone that has questions for the speaker today, can we signify by a raise of hands? So we can call you and you can ask your questions, make your clarifications. But before then, I want to say a big thank you for honoring this invitation and for helping as many of us that knows what this is doing to the organization, see how we can improve and help ourselves. Thank you so much, sir. So it's open ground now for questions and clarifications. Do we have anyone with questions? You think there's something we should be doing or something we should add to this? This is the time to ask.
It is, and I'm more than happy for my slides to be shared with everybody on the call. The more that we can talk about human factors and incivility around the surgical checklist and our intraoperative parts of theatre, the better we can all improve our patient journey.
Yeah. I must add something that one thing that I think they've included in my place of work is having the float nurse always for all the shifts that we run. This is because sometimes nature calls. I can remember there was a time I ate something that I was not familiar with, and I was in the room and I had to break scrub because if I don't, I'm going to poop on myself. Thank God we had what is it called? Thank God we had a float person who could come in at that time to help me so I can just do what I need to do before coming in. These are part of the things that we should be considering as organization, because anything can happen anytime. And what if something happens? Someone should be there to help so that the thing can continue and not make the team frustrated because one person is out doing something. Do we have anyone? Yeah.
And that's where we're introducing what you call a second timeout, or the stop moment, when you're several hours into the procedure. So this allows the scrub practitioner and the operating surgeon to have a break for 5 or 10 minutes, whether that's to go to the toilet for a comfort break, have something to eat, something to drink. And then you do, I'd say, the stop part. So the ST stands for the situation in theatre. The surgeon will then say where we are and what the next steps are about. O is obviously the operation itself, and P, the procedure and the staff in that theatre. Has anybody got any questions? And having that 5 or 10 minutes break midway through a long procedure just gives everybody that refocus and can concentrate on the next steps for the remaining hours that are planned in theatre.
Thank you so much, sir. So I don't see any hands up. Does this mean all what our speaker said today is well understood and we don't have any addition, we don't have any clarification? I don't see nobody. So I'll just hand over to the next person who is going to round up probably, and that should be it. Thank you so much, sir, once again.
No problem. Thank you.
We hope when we call you next time, we'll get to see you.
There's a hand there from Claire, I see.
There's a question on the chat box.
Hi, Nigel. Thank you so much for that. I'm actually researching some of this at the moment for a degree, and I was really interested in how you find, do surgeons engage with this, or do you tend to find it's mostly the theatre staff?
So I'll be completely honest with you. We started it off with theatre staff, and then as the questions started emerging, the staff was talking about it more, the medical staff became involved. However, I'm doing this same lecture again in a couple of weeks to all the anaesthetists and surgeons at my local trust, because they're now looking at it. And when we go in terms of when any incidents occur in theatre, whether that be through the Datex reporting system and there's incivility, one of the things that we talk about and we make sure that's fed back as part of the feedback to the person who submitted the form and to the staff involved is just to open their mind up to how incivility can affect the entire multidisciplinary team and the working. And as we said before, incivility for the operating theatres is quite a new topic. It's emerging themes coming throughout. There's not many papers written on it, so it is still quite new. But a lot of the training is for medical staff around human factors and incivility. So this is where I'm trying to do it now for us as non-medical staff, that we get the education and training too.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Adebusola Wokole, founder, to round up today's meeting. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Nigel, Robert. Thanks for the insightful presentation. Honestly, I personally believe, like we all believe, that everyone deserves dignity and respect at work. And incivility issues is one of the reasons why people actually resign. People resign from jobs because they are not being supported by their managers. And when they give suggestions, for example, if someone is a low-level staff and you find out that your managers are being dismissive of that, and the incivility issue that you've expanded upon is one of the reasons why a lot of issues actually go wrong in the operating room environment. You've dealt so much on the topic, especially in terms of decision-making and the role of leadership in civility in the operating room environment. I really want to say thank you so much for the lecture. I believe we all need that training. It should be incorporated into practice, into the curriculum of perioperative education, And everyone should actually know about that, not just nurses, doctors, like you mentioned, all the supporting staff and the operating room environment as well. So thank you so much for the insightful presentation. Definitely, I think we need to do a second part of the training, which it might be in another few weeks. We might bring you back to continue from where you stopped. Thank you so much for always honoring our invitation. And at the same time, I really want to say thank you to the Education and Training Committee for facilitating the session. It was well organized. Thank you for always doing a brilliant job. And I really want to say thank you to everyone who connected from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zones. Thank you for taking the time out of no time to actually connect with us and join us. Hopefully we'll see you in another 2 weeks for our next webinar. So thank you everyone for the session. Thank you, Mr. Nigel, and thank you to our Education and Training Committee members. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.